entry into Jerusalem began the final ascent to the cross. Entering the city in a victory parade, a conquering ruler would ride a stallion, but this one comes on a borrowed donkey, a symbol of peace. It is written, when they had come near Jerusalem and had reached Bethphage at the Mount of Olives, Jesus sent 2 disciples, saying, go into the village ahead of you, and immediately you will find a donkey tied and a colt with her. Untie them and bring them to me. If anyone says anything to you, just say this, the teacher needs them, and he'll send them immediately. This took place to fulfill what had been spoken through the prophet, saying, tell the daughter of Zion, look, your king is coming to you humble and mounted on a donkey and on a colt, the foal of a donkey. The disciples went and did as Jesus had directed. They brought the donkey and the colt and put their cloaks on them, and Jesus sat on them. A very large crowd spread their cloaks on the road, and others cut branches from the trees and spread them on the road. The crowds that went ahead and that followed were shouting, Hosanna to the Son of David. Blessed is the one who comes in the name of the Most High. Hosanna in the highest heaven. When Jesus entered Jerusalem, the whole city was in turmoil, asking, who is this? The crowds were saying, this is the prophet Jesus from Nazareth in Galilee. This is the gospel of Christ. Praise to you, O Christ. Grace to you and peace from God our Creator and Christ our wisdom. Amen. Why? Why, if human beings are made in the image of a loving God, why are we so cruel to each other? As a pastor preparing for services commemorating Jesus' last week on earth, I've been struggling not with the suffering of Jesus, but with the suffering of the world. I know this is Palm Sunday. This is the celebration of Jesus' triumphant entry into Jerusalem. He's thumbing his nose at the Roman Empire, mocking Pontius Pilate's victorious military parade on the other side of the city. He's riding a donkey, not a war horse. And we have palms, right? We're trying to get a sense of the mood of the day. But really, I think most of us are pretty self-conscious about doing that. We just want to get to our seats, right? Get on with the service. After all, we all know who Jesus is. We know the story. We know how it ends. We're ready for Easter. And Palm Sunday feels a little bit like Easter light. Palms aren't lilies, but they're fun to wave around. Imagine being in a crowd yelling, yay, Jesus, right? We want Holy Week to end here with a parade and then jump ahead to Easter. Do not pass Maundy Thursday. Do not take in Good Friday. The writer Anne Lamott, who many of you may know, has written about this. She says, I don't have the right personality for Good Friday, for the crucifixion. I'd like to skip ahead to the resurrection. In fact, I'd like to skip ahead to the resurrection vision of one of the kids in our Sunday school who drew a picture of the Easter bunny outside the tomb, everlasting life in a basket full of chocolates. Now you're talking. But here's the thing. It's already too late to skip ahead. The political and the religious leaders were already plotting to get rid of Jesus. The late Fred Craddock, who was a professor of preaching at the Candler School of Theology at Emory University, he once asked, what is this? A parade, a protest march, or a funeral procession? And he answered his own question and said, it's all three. Without a doubt, it's all three. And we like the first two parts, right? We like the parade, we like the protest march, but ultimately we get to the third part. Craddock says, you could hear the groan of God each step along the way. Jesus was not marching into a welcoming city, but to his own grave. So in spite of the parade, we know that suffering looms ahead for Jesus. And although we know the story and how it ends on Easter, some of you may have heard, this is an old sermon by Tony Campola, if you know the writer Tony Campola, and he had a sermon called It's Friday, but Sunday's Coming. You can find it on YouTube if you want to hear him actually do it. He got it from another preacher, but he made it his own and made it actually into a book as well. But anyway, here's just a little piece of it. I can't do it as good as Tony Campbell does it. So look at the YouTube video so you get the full flavor. But it's Friday. Jesus is praying, Peter's straying, Judas is betraying. But Sunday's coming. It's Friday. Pilate is judging, the council is fudging, the crowds are shouting, the disciples are pouting, Mary's crying, and Peter's denying, but they don't know that Sunday is coming. It's Friday. With whips, Jesus is torn, with scarlet robe and crown of thorns, he's adorned. By him the cross is born, but they don't know. And at this point, the congregation is supposed to get into the rhythm of the thing, right? But they don't know that Sunday's coming. There you go. It's Friday. On the cross, Jesus hangs and feels its pangs. Sin is crushing. Blood is gushing. His life is rushing out. Can no one save him? He who so brave dared face the grave. No one. It's Friday, but Sunday's coming. It's Friday. The earth trembles. The sky grows dark. My King yields his spirit. Death's victory is stark. Sin has prevailed. The saints bewail, and Satan's laughter exhales. Jesus was buried. At the tomb, the soldiers tarried. The stone was rolled. Death had its hold, and even the sun went cold. But it was only Friday, and Sunday's coming. And he did this so great, I can't even try to imitate it. It's Friday, but Sunday's coming. There you go. Thanks for helping me out with that. And yes, Sunday is coming. Easter's coming. But we're not there yet. We are not there yet. And frankly, with the state of the world as it is, I have to think we should wonder, what will Easter really mean in our world today? Now, the earliest Christians, they interpreted the horrific death of Jesus as an expression of God's unfailing love. Now, that sounds kind of strange, doesn't it? It's not that God willed or caused this torture and death, but rather they saw this as a demonstration of God's solidarity with human suffering and of the willingness to forgive the worst of human behavior. So yes, Sunday is coming. With a powerful message of resurrection, we're assured that death does not have the final word. But I am pretty sure that many people will feel like we are still living in a Good Friday world. I often feel like we're stuck in a Good Friday world. Why? If human beings are made in the image of a loving God, why are we so cruel to one another? And why do we feel so powerless to do anything about it? And just as we're tempted to look away from the crucifixion, we are also tempted to look away from the suffering of innocent people in places like Ukraine, and Syria, and Somalia, and so many other places. We see the pictures and hear the horrific stories. And perhaps where we feel the most despairing is over the innocents caught in the Israel-Hamas war. Israel-Palestine, our spiritual home, is being torn apart. At Holy Family Catholic Church in Gaza, the supplies are running out. Holy Family currently provides shelter to 512 Christians, including 120 children. In a Catholic publication called Our Sunday Visitor, there's an article called Remembering Gaza's Christians This Holy Week. And it says, due to the scarcity of clean food and water, the current situation makes these final days of Lent the worst days that the Christians of Holy Family have suffered since the outbreak of the war. And in the coming week, the church will relive the solemn mysteries of Jesus' last days. Those days were marked by a great evil. Jesus endured the most inhumane and brutal pain. He was mocked and beaten as he carried the instrument of his death to Calvary. He died in shame on a cross. And it's difficult to relive each year. Our stomachs turn, meditating on the cruelty he freely suffered. And yet his body, the church, suffers still. And we suffer. We all suffer because we are part of that one body. We're also disturbed by painful rhetoric that pits one group against another. Here at home, as in other places, battle lines are drawn. Even Berkeley, my city, there's the Berkeley Side newspaper said, a debate over Israel-Palestine curriculum flares at Berkeley schools. Just what you need, another school board issue to deal with, right? But a federal civil rights complaint was filed last month alleging severe and widespread anti-Semitism in Berkeley schools, including teachers being allowed to indoctrinate other students with anti-Semitic rhetoric, tropes, and false information about Israelis and Jews. And then there was a pushback to that, which argued that it was a harassment tactic designed to clamp down on teaching Palestinian history in school. That's just one example. It's just one example of what is going on today. We human beings seem unable to adopt both and mentality rather than an either or unable to acknowledge all the shades of gray in the situations, or to separate the actions of governments and militant groups from ordinary citizens. And yes, I know it's complicated, and I don't claim to have any solutions to the world's ills, but I do know suffering when I see it. And I wonder what to do about it. What's Jesus going to do about it? What's Easter got to do with it beyond a picture of an Easter bunny outside the tomb, everlasting life, and a basket full of chocolates? Fred Craddock says if we're going to stick with Jesus beyond Palm Sunday, then we have to convert from reasoning that says, wherever the Messiah is, there is no misery, to one that says, wherever there's misery, there is the Messiah. We have to seek to understand that Jesus doesn't get us out of human difficulty, but sends us into places of great need where we can witness to God's power in this world. Ah, there it is. We are the ones who bring Jesus into the hurting places in the world. And now the question becomes, well, how do we do that? And there's a multitude of answers, big ones and small ones. Katerina's bracelet and bake sale for the World Food Program, right? We can find and support reputable organizations like World Food Program providing relief. We can find and support organizations working for peace with justice in these places. They are out there. They're doing good work. We need to support them. We personally can avoid using polarizing language that neglects the suffering on all sides. And we need to speak up when others do it. We need to separate the political, the governmental entities from ordinary people and speak up when others don't. And of course, and I should have said this first, pray, pray, pray again and again. In the Melbourne Anglican magazine, Tim Budge wondered, somehow light and freedom broke in at Easter, Will it also happen in Gaza? Where does light and freedom appear in all of this? I'm not sure. Somehow it broke through in the Easter story. Will it also happen in Gaza? Are we ready for it? Does our sense of our own place in the world allow for solidarity, for prayer, for action, and for hope? And do we have the courage to see this conflict as the possibility of a breaking open, in the same vein as the fall of the Berlin Wall, the sudden release of Nelson Mandela, the courage of Rosa Parks tipping the balance for civil rights in the USA? This is our moment to align with the arc of justice, but only if we have the courage to see the possibility of the light of the gospel story in the Holy Land in the 2020s. But only if we have the courage to see the possibility of the light of the gospel story in the Holy Land. Will we have the courage to go forth into Holy Week? Will we have the courage to stay with Jesus through the betrayal, the arrest, the denial, the torture? Will we have the courage to look at the horror of the cross? Will we have the courage to have hope for the possibility of peace in Ukraine, and Syria, and Somalia, and Israel, and Gaza, and all of the other places? Will we take the Easter message into the world in whatever ways we can, large and small? For now, will we take our Palm Sunday palms home with us as a reminder of our commitment to the arc of justice, in the name of our suffering servant, Jesus the Christ? Amen. Do we have some music?